Let's just start with the obvious question here, and that's really about occupancy, vacancies, and what sort of the long-term outlook is here for the commercial real estate space, given that we're still not quite out of the woods with regards to the shelter in place.
Well, Romaine, we are definitively not out of the woods, and we won't be in all probability till there's a vaccine. Occupancy rates in New York for office space haven't really changed materially. What's changed is with the great uncertainty about when and how people will go back to work, the amount of new long-term leases being signed, some sublease spaces coming onto the market, some renewals are getting done, extensions are getting done, but long-term decisions are really on hold until people figure out what's going to happen long-term with the way they use space and when they're going to be able to come back.
Bob, paint the picture of the future as you see it. Will flexible working still exist? Will an office be more a social place one comes to once, twice, 3 times a week, but mainly works from home? How do you see the dynamic changing?
Carolyn, there's some things we're uncertain about, but some things we're pretty confident about. And I'm going to spike out 3. Number one, most office users will create more flexibility for their people to spend some of their working hours from home. Some people will be able to work most of the time from home, some part of the time from home. Number 2, we are quite confident, having surveyed in depth a large number of our occupier or tenant clients around the world, that the vast majority of them expect to come back to the office in a very significant way, for collaboration, for bringing new employees on board, for culture, especially culture. We're all living off the fumes of a culture that existed before we went home. We're virtually certain that most companies will come back to work in a significant way and their office space will be important. The third thing we're highly confident of is that the space will be used in a less dense way. So that will offset some of the space that maybe, or some of the people that work from home not coming in. There'll be greater spread in the space for those that do come in.
Does that mean, Bob, that I actually need more square footage if I need more distance in between every worker? Is that where then you start to actually see maybe more demand, as I need more space for social distancing?
There will almost certainly be more space per person in the offices. We've been on a long-term trend to have less space per person. That's going to reverse now. We're quite confident of that. But companies will optimize. They'll say if on average we used to have 70% of our people in the office, and now because some are working from home, we're going to have 60% in. They'll take space for less people, but they'll take more space per person. We don't know exactly how that offset will work. In the long run, our guess sitting here today is that over several years, the use of office space, the amount of office space will settle in around where it is now. Of course, we have an awful lot left to learn.
There's also, though, I mean, this pandemic and the work from home environment has given, I think, a lot of folks a chance to sort of reevaluate what they value with regards to going into the office or staying at home and sort of what works best for them. I'm wondering, when you look at sort of the entire ecosystem out there of the way cities are constructed around offices, and then you tie in the restaurants and retail and the residences that sort of crop up around those to serve these people, are the long-term trends really going to be in favor of, I guess, what we've gotten used to over the past, couple of decades? And if a recovery does appear, is it going to be sort of synchronized where all the sort of elements in this ecosystem sort of rise up together?
I think it's inevitable that they have to move in sync with one another. When people are in office spaces, they use restaurants, they use laundries in the neighborhood, etc. And I think what's going to happen, we believe what's going to happen is when people can evaluate the situation without being in the middle of all the challenges that COVID-19 pose, they will be much more comfortable coming back to work. And by the way, we will have changed a lot of things. We will have changed the configuration in office space. We will have changed the way we sanitize offices and people use face masks and wash their hands and so on and so forth. So we'll get to a place where people are more comfortable coming back. And that whole ecosystem will be utilized more the way it was historically, but there will inevitably be changes.
Bob, you're a global company. We sit here in New York, you sit there in Texas. Talk to us about which cities are hit the hardest. Is it Shanghai, New York, London?
Well, we all know New York was hit very hard, and we all know China was hit first. I'll give you an interesting statistic. We operate in 400 and some markets around the world, in all the major countries around the world, obviously all the regions. In Asia, about 75% of our offices have reopened. Some of them never closed. For instance, early this morning, I was on the phone with our leader from Taiwan, and she told me they never closed. But about 75% of our offices are back to work in Asia. About 10% of our offices are back to work here in the US. It's just a reflection of where we are
Yeah.
with the disease right now.